That sound there is probably the unmistakable sound of Gerry Rafferty's saxophone riff on probably one of the most famous Scottish songs, certainly of the 70s. The reason obviously we're doing that is because Gerry Rafferty's passed away at the very early age of 63. We're here with Billy Sloan, who's a resident showbiz expert and who knew Gerry Rafferty, having interviewed him in his pomp. How important was he?
I think he was very important because not only was he successful on home ground, he was successful in global terms thanks to classic songs like Baker Street and Stuck in the Middle with You. And, I think that when it comes to music, like boxing and to a lesser extent like football, we tend to punch above our weight. And, Gerry Rafferty was a guy who, came out of very humble beginnings.
Absolutely.
And became a star in a global sense. A few years ago, I think he got some kind of award in America for the 5 millionth radio play of Baker Street.
Well, I was reading somewhere that song alone made him 80 grand a year.
Yeah, that song would probably give him a very comfortable and nice lifestyle, because think of all these classic, rock stations that you frequently tune into in the car, and, there can't be a 20-minute period when one of them is not playing Baker Street. It's such an iconic song, Stuck in the Middle with You, Get It Right Next Time. So, he had a few real classics in his songwriting catalogue.
And perhaps that Stuck in the Middle with You, the Steelers Wheel song, unknown to the younger generation until Tarantino picked up for that film Reservoir Dogs and became, an overnight success for him, second time around, if you like, and really pushed him towards a new audience.
Yeah, in 1992, I remember talking to him a few years after that and saying, just how did that come about? How did the film and the song, cross paths creatively? And he said that he'd been approached by, Quentin Tarantino's studio, and they asked if they could use, Stuck in the Middle with You for one of the scenes in the film. So his immediate reaction was, let me know what context it's going to be used in. So they actually sent him a script, and I remember him telling me that he was sitting up in bed reading through the script one night, late at night, and he came to the iconic scene,
scene, yeah,
where Mr. Blonde, brilliantly played by Michael Madsen, has, get the policeman, tied to a chair, and he tunes into his favourite radio show, which is K. Billy's Super Sounds of the 70s.
That's right.
And the guy's playing one of his favourite records, which is Stuck in the Middle with You by this singer-songwriter from Paisley.
Turn it up.
And Rafferty said that he dropped the script and then he nearly fell out the bed because he couldn't imagine how the song and how the visuals were going to match up. Then, of course, he went to see the movie.
And they do, don't they?
And it's now such an iconic piece that you can't listen to Stuck in the Middle with You in the car radio without thinking of Michael Madsen
shuffle,
doing his little shuffle. And, the guy screaming as he gets his ear hacked off. So, I'm sure he would have liked it to become really iconic in different circumstances, but who's complaining?
Absolutely. You mentioned Paisley there, and obviously that's where his roots were, and very proud of those roots as well.
Because Gerry Rafferty, learnt his craft and paid his dues in the old-fashioned way. There was none of this being on X Factor for 13 weeks and then suddenly you're playing the Hall 4 at the SEC. He started his musical apprenticeship in the folk clubs of Glasgow in the west of Scotland in the 60s and early 70s. I'm amazed when I was doing some radio interviews earlier today to find that some people were not aware that he was in the Humble Bums way, a then aspiring and unknown comedian called Billy Connolly, and according to Scottish rock mythology, the reason they split up was because the gaps between songs were getting bigger and bigger as Connolly was getting into his gags and funny routines. So while Connolly pursued a comedic path, he pursued a musical path, and they remained great friends over the years. But Connolly's now a global icon as a comedian and an actor, and Gerry Rafferty became a legend as a musician, so it worked out well for both of them.
It'll be interesting to hear what Billy has to say about Gerry passing away.
Yeah, Connolly's going to be releasing a statement through his office today, and I'm sure he's hurting as much as every Gerry Rafferty fan is.
But one of the things that we can't ignore with Gerry was the fact that the reason he's passed away so young is his battle with the bottle, and fairly well documented, and the usual stories of trashing hotels and all the rest of it, but a very, very sad story, his descent into alcoholism, and one that's really still worth telling, because it does show you what a wasted talent he was in the later years.
Yeah, sadly, where we live in West Central Scotland, alcoholism is something that's, touched all of our lives in some shape or form, and Gerry Rafferty was no exception to that. As you say, it was well documented that he'd been having a long extended battle with the booze, to such an extent that about a year ago, I think it was, there was stories circulating that he'd in fact died.
That's right, yeah.
And a statement was put out saying that news of his death had been greatly exaggerated, and he was living quite happily in Tuscany. But of course, he went into hospital in November of 2010, and the diagnosis initially was very bad. But then we didn't hear anything after that, so you just automatically assume that no news is good news.
Absolutely.
And that if you're not hearing anything, that maybe he's on the mend. Sadly, it turned out not to be the case. But I think that the biggest tragedy of all of this is that the guy died at 63, which is no age at all, because when you think of other performers in their mid-60s like Paul McCartney or Rod Stewart or David Bowie or Elton John or Ray Davies of the Kinks or Brian Wilson, or indeed Billy Connolly himself, who's 68, they're still doing good and meaningful work. And I think we would still maybe not have got a great album from Gerry Rafferty, but maybe a couple of great songs here or there. Sadly now we'll never know if that was ever going to come to fruition. So it's a great shame that he died at such a relatively young age.
As you say, a sad loss. Our regards go to his family and his friends, and indeed his fans. Probably worth playing out by one of his better known songs, Get It Right Next Time. Let's do that.